Today on PGTV News, students have returned to school, but has it been smooth sailing? We have the details on some of the issues students and parents are facing, as well as where you can pick up meals for your distance learning student coming up.
And a local Christmas parade has been canceled due to the pandemic. What that means for the city, that and more are ahead on PGTV News.
Welcome to PGTV News. I'm Steve Barnes.
And I'm Tina Mann. Polk County Public School students have not been in a formal classroom environment since March. This was a result of schools closing just before spring break in response to COVID-19. In June and July, the district surveyed parents asking how they would prefer for their child to attend school. Most of the district's 107,000 students' parents responded, and the outcome was split almost evenly between face-to-face learning and e-learning that was connected to their child's school. In addition, 8.6% of students opted to participate in Polk Virtual School, which is a district-wide online school. For those who opted for e-learning and Polk Virtual School, there were some major technical glitches, both with the district and with Zoom, which crashed Monday morning. Dozens of complaints were logged on the Polk County Public Schools Facebook page. Parents were reporting that they couldn't log in, and when they called the district's helpline, their calls were being disconnected. In other education news, the Polk Education Association and district officials will be back at the bargaining table this week to try to hammer out a memorandum of understanding regarding work conditions for teachers and paraeducators during the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic is also adding to a teacher shortage. Last week, there were 109 teacher vacancies in the district and 76 paraeducator openings. Substitutes are used when those positions can't be filled, and in some cases, substitutes will teach the entire school year if a suitable replacement can't be found. I have definitely been on the receiving end of some of these technological glitches, but I know as a parent, and I've been encouraging my 3 students to have grace and patience as they work through all these. I mean, because this is new to everybody, they all have to, start somewhere and work through everything, and then eventually it'll be a little bit more smooth.
Well, and we even experienced some of those Zoom technical difficulties here in the office as we were trying to do some meetings and things on Monday morning. I think everybody across the board was experiencing those. That wasn't just an isolated educational issue. However, probably spurred on by the massive amounts of students starting their school day on Zoom, I'm sure.
Right, and a lot of the teachers were requiring that they have their video on, not realizing how much bandwidth that actually puts on the server and can overwhelm the servers.
Yeah, but certainly they're adapting, and I'm sure this whole process, like you said, is going to be a little bit of a learning process as we go. They've prepared as much as they can, and now it's kind of one of those deals where I'm sure their IT department is scrambling to try to figure out how to keep things up and running.
They're working hard.
Poor guys. As they did before the summer break, Polk schools will be offering free breakfast and lunch to all students. For most students who are distance learning, meals will be available for pickup on Wednesdays from 9:30 to 10:30 a.m. Each student will receive 5 breakfasts and 5 lunches. Polk schools would prefer that campus e-school students pick up meals at their enrolled school if possible. But families can request an alternative site if they have children in more than one school or if they live far from their enrolled school. When picking up the meals, e-school students will need to provide their name and ID number. Students do not have to be present to receive the meals, but family members or guardians must present at least one form of student identification. Please note that Polk Virtual School students are not eligible for free school meals based on USDA guidelines. Some schools have different schedules or alternate pickup locations. To find out the most up-to-date information about your student's school, visit polkschoolsfl.com/lunch locations. vital service to families. Many families really depend on those meals for their kids throughout the school year.
They really do, and even those of us who aren't as dependent on it have really felt the crunch since COVID-19 started. I had to explain to my kids the other day that my grocery bill has nearly doubled, simply because of grocery prices and the fact that they're home all the time. So
and bored.
Bored.
Bored kids eat more.
and I have 3 teenagers who can eat about the size of a football team between each one of them. So it's like 3 football teams.
Yeah.
But this you don't realize how much you use it until it's gone.
Yep.
So this is definitely a great service.
That's good.
And as kids are returning to school, new faces will be seen in a few principals' offices, according to a release by Polk County Public Schools. Kathleen Elementary in Lakeland is getting a new principal, Adrian Anthony. He is coming from Hudson Elementary in Pasco County. Over at Ridge Community High in Haines City, Angela Clark is moving up from the assistant principal position she has held since 2014. And Jennifer Sasser is Central Florida Aerospace Academy's new assistant principal. Ms. Sasser previously held the assistant principal position at Southwest Middle School in Lakeland.
Sounds like we've got some very qualified folks moving into those positions.
We really do, and Polk County does a very good job of helping their administrators or their teachers move up into those positions when they're
Nobody
seeking
knows
them.
those schools better than the folks who have been working in them for
Right.
many years, and obviously a continuity of service is beneficial not only to the schools but to the teachers and the students.
Right, and if you look at who has been hired to fill these administrator positions, I would say that the vast majority of them have already worked within the Polk County school system.
Well, mail-in voting is obviously a topic of national conversation. Here in Polk County, mail-in voting increased compared to the last 2 primary elections. The Polk County Elections Office reported an increase of 67.2% in voting by mail compared with the 2016 primary election. Mail-in ballots for last week's election showed an increase of 40.9% over the volume in the 2018 primary contest. These figures include ballots requested by mail but dropped off in person at one of the Polk County Department's offices. Election staff did not detect a significant increase in those delivered by voters rather than mailed. Polk County voters submitted 62,915 ballots by mail for last week's election, according to the Supervisor of Elections office. That compared with 37,631 in the 2016 primary and 44,665 in the 2018 primary. 87 mail-in ballots were rejected for lacking a signature, and another 169 were rejected because the signatures were determined not to match those on file with the office. That represents a rejection rate of 0.4%. 371 ballots were received too late to be counted. The Supervisor of Elections office hasn't tracked such uncounted ballots in previous years, but did so for this election due to recent reports about delays in mail delivery. The percentage of voters requesting mail ballots is expected to reach record levels for the November 3rd general election. The deadline to request a vote by mail ballot is October 24th.
Voting is so important that, to me, if voting by mail is the only way that you will get your voice heard, then it's an absolute good thing to go ahead and take advantage of that.
Right. And it's important, first of all, we see from this primary election, first of all, if you're getting mail-in ballots, make sure that you've signed up for it in time. So the deadline here is October 24th. Second of all, get it mailed out. Fill it out and get it mailed in time. You don't want to wait until the day before the election to put that ballot in the mail.
Right, because it won't get there.
Because it's not going to get there in time.
Mail service has slowed down substantially. It used to be you would get something somewhere in 2 days. Now it's taking 5 to 7 business days. So you can't depend on that. And if it's the day before the election, you can go down and drop that ballot at any election site, or you can take the day of to any voting precinct or to your voting precinct and trade it for an actual ballot.
And then the third thing, obviously, so not only do you want to make sure that it's mailed in time, but you also want to make sure that all your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted. follow the instructions, make sure that you sign that signature, sign it clearly, make sure that your name and your signature are matching up. Don't sign your nickname onto it,
Right.
your official name that's registered in your voters.
And one thing I discovered this year that I didn't actually know is that you can actually log into the supervisor of elections to make sure that they've received your ballot. It'll actually show you a 1, 2, 3, 4. Your ballot's been mailed, your ballot's been received, your ballot's been counted.
Right.
So that way you know that if there's an error or something, that you can still have an opportunity at the polls to get your voice. Polk County's public transit agency has announced its biggest expansion in nearly 2 decades. Starting September 8th, Citrus Connection will begin operating a 3rd transit hub out of Posner Park in Davenport. This will include 2 new bus routes in the eastern half of the county. The Lakeland-based transportation agency will use part of approximately $7 million in federal coronavirus relief funds to incorporate Posner Park's newly constructed park and ride facility as a cog in its larger countywide system. This will allow riders to transfer between the 4 routes. COVID-19's economic impact will likely increase the number of people who depend on Polk's public buses. Increases occurred in 2006 when gas prices soared nationally, and again during the Great Recession from 2008 to 2010. To keep up on any changes, visit ridecitrus.com.
This is kind of one of those unintended consequences, I guess you could say. Something that you're not really aware of. I mean, obviously you think about people losing their jobs, you think about all these different avenues, but then you look at transportation. Are people
Right.
able to afford owning a vehicle anymore?
Right.
So these busing transportation, these busing routes become a lot more important.
Right, and the silver lining here is that people in the Four Corners area, in that part of Polk, in the eastern part of Polk, have been rallying and rallying and rallying for state funds for years for bus routes on that side of the county. So this is actually a blessing that they're able to use these funds that wouldn't necessarily be used otherwise to go ahead and make that a reality, to serve the people in those areas that are quickly becoming very populated and very used. So, I mean, it's definitely, coronavirus at least has some good outcomes.
Yeah, it's amazing to see how quickly that area is growing, that northeast section of Polk County. Of course, our planners here at the county had planned that, had seen that coming for the better part of a decade now.
And they've been requesting those routes, but it just hadn't been previously funded. So
Well, it's good to see
great that it is.
some new stuff coming in there and infrastructure being added. Well, for the first time in 40 years, Lakeland will not have a parade this December. The city announced last week that it has canceled plans for the Lakeland Christmas Parade. The Junior League of Greater Lakeland, organizers of the parade, had obvious concerns about the COVID-19 pandemic, the uncertainty it presents, and a potential reduction in participation. By the first week of September, the Parks and Recreation Department typically has more than 100 applications for the Christmas parade. This year, only 10 applications were submitted, and there were no marching bands. Last year's parade drew about 110 participants. The procession started at the RP Funding Center and covered a 1.25-mile course around Lake Mirror and back down Lemon Street. One of the main public events staged in the city each year, many Lakeland residents placed chairs along the parade route days in advance. This is a sad thing.
This is a sad thing.
Everybody in Lakeland looks forward to the Christmas parade.
That's because a lot of us have literally, I'm 40. Like literally this Christmas parade has been in my life for the last 40 years. So it's just a given that it's going to happen.
Yeah.
I think people were shocked and kind of dismayed that 4th of July events were canceled, but I don't think we expected to still be in this position looking at the actual holidays.
But, I mean, kudos to the Greater League of Lakeland.
Safety is more important.
Yeah, they're looking out for the safety of the residents. They're looking out for the safety of people. You can't blame them for that. And certainly, if you were to hold a big event and suddenly there was a giant outbreak of coronavirus, I'm sure there would be many cries of public outlash. So, they're doing what's necessary. Unfortunately, and we see a lot of that with a lot of events being canceled, held off until the next year. It is just the necessity of what's going on.
Problems with the 2020 Florida bar exam prompted over 50 attorneys and almost 24 law school graduates to file an emergency petition with the Supreme Court. Last week, protesters lined the sidewalk in front of the court's headquarters in Tallahassee, demanding a solution. COVID-19, social distancing measures, and technical difficulties have plagued the 2020 bar exam. Originally scheduled for July at the Tampa Convention Center, the exam was moved to August 18th, rescheduled to the 19th due to a primary election conflict, and then canceled again. The Florida Board of Bar Examiners have rescheduled the event for October, but there is no specific date as of this broadcast. Florida's highest court announced that a program last week that allows applicants for the 2020 bar exam to practice under supervision until 30 days after the results of February 2021 tests are released. Applications for the October test will be available on August 31st.
I can understand why they're anxious to get this taken care of. There's a lot of school debt out there that needs to start being repaid, and without getting that bar passed, they can't really get into it.
Right, and after 9 years in a lot of cases of incredibly hard work, to have to wait even longer for something that you're prepared for, and getting farther and farther away from that knowledge,
right.
Away from the test, I'm sure is causing a lot of anxiety.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll also see around the time of these tests popping up, we'll see opportunities for folks to refresher courses going into the bar.
They're going to need it.
Well, Florida Southern College will receive $250,000 for the restoration of the Polk County Science Building's planetarium through a program administered by the National Park Service. The Lakeland College is one of 2 Florida recipients of Save America's Treasures grants that were announced last week. Congress appropriated funding for the program in 2019 from the Historic Preservation Fund, which uses revenue from federal oil leases to provide preservation assistance. The program requires applicants to leverage project funds from other sources to match the grant money. The $12.8 million award will yield more than $25.9 million in private and public investment. The science building, designed by revered architect Frank Lloyd Wright, was completed in 1958, the last of a dozen Wright structures built on campus. It contains the only planetarium designed by Wright to be constructed. The building contains offices for professors in science and related subjects, laboratories for science classes, lecture rooms, several computer labs, and some storage areas, according to a description on the Florida Southern website. The round dome of the planetarium can be seen on the south end of the campus near Lake Hollingsworth. The Save America's Treasure program was established in 1998 and is a partnership between the National Park Service and other federal agencies. The program provided $323 million to more than 1,200 projects from 1999 to 2018.
There's a big push for preservation here in Polk County, and I'm thankful for it. I mean, we have so many historic landmarks and so many historic districts that, thanks to money like this and the National Preservation for Trust and things like that, they're able to keep these in pristine condition so that people can continue to enjoy them.
Yeah, and certainly Florida Southern College is one of the gems of Polk County. The Frank Lloyd architecture on the campus, as well as many of the new buildings that they've built with keeping in line with that same type of modern architecture.
I'm a big fan of Frank Lloyd Wright. He's the only architect I've ever seen that makes me feel tall.
That's a good point.
For the 11th consecutive year, the Princeton Review has recognized Florida Southern College campus for its beauty and architectural heritage. The Lakeland College is the only institution in Florida included in the top 20 of Princeton Review's most beautiful campus listings for 2021. Only about 14% of the nation's 2,800 four-year colleges are profiled in the best 386 colleges, which was published August 18th. Florida Southern's campus setting, home to the world's largest single-site collection of structures designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, topped the Princeton Review's most beautiful listing in both 2011 and 2012. Entries in the guide's top 20 list are determined solely by surveys of students at each of the featured colleges. I feel like we just talked about this.
Yeah, no surprise there. This is a recurring story every year. You know, it's obviously a beautiful campus. It makes the lists of most beautiful campuses year after year. They do a great job of maintaining it, obviously doing even more to raise funds to restore historic buildings on the campus. So yeah, kudos. Thanks for watching PGTV News. The board review is coming up, but first, a woman grew up with limited access to medical care. Now, as a doctor, she's giving back to her community by treating the uninsured. Take a look.
All we ask is their income. I grew up in a very small village in Tanzania. It was a village of 500. We used to get our vaccines through UNICEF. I contracted malaria in Tanzania and almost died when I was in high school. And then when I was in Pakistan, I had typhoid fever. I'm a cancer survivor. I have lupus. Those are all elements that just talk to me and tell me that I need to pay forward. My family were third generation Asians in Africa. Idi Amin was expelling Asians from East Africa. That idea of nationalization was coming south into Tanzania. Here I was, a passport in hand, leaving Tanzania and no longer wanted in the country of your birthplace. I moved to Iran because I had a scholarship from the Queen, and she was encouraging Muslim women to go to professional schools. I wrote to her and told her about my situation and how my parents would have to leave our country and they would be going to Canada. And she wrote back and she said, I also want to give you a little buffer so that you can visit your... She said, I want to give you a little buffer so you can visit your parents every year. And I thought, that was so sweet of her. She hadn't even met me. She didn't know who I was. I mean, who would think of something like that? My boyfriend at the time was already here in Atlanta going to law school. My husband, we got married here in Atlanta. We have 2 children. He was a lawyer. He was shot and killed exactly yesterday, 21 years ago. The Lord says that I'm going to test you, and I'm going to test you with the best that you have. He will reward those who wait and endure with patience. And that's what I've done. Through every loss, I have, think I've become a more tender person. My co-founder, Dr. Saeed Raiz, came to my office and he said, would you like to be part of starting a free clinic? And it took me 20 seconds to respond to him. It's a calling, and you just hear it from inside yourself.
Welcome to the Board Review with news about your county government. I'm your host, Tricia Pichette. Today you'll learn about County Commission activities from the August 18th board meeting. Wabash Avenue will soon be getting a new multi-use trail following the approval of an agreement with Burgess and Nipel, Inc., which will provide the surveying, designing, permitting, engineering, and final construction bid documents for the project. The project will include a 10-foot wide multi-use path on the east side of the roadway from Ariana Street to Jesse Keene Elementary, and a 5-foot wide sidewalk from Jesse Keene Elementary to Hickory Street. This approved portion of the project is expected to cost about $330,000. The Chestnut Road Sidewalk project was approved for modification number 1 to the consultant agreement with NVS Inc., which will amend the scope of services to add design and permitting services for the second phase of the project at a cost of about $257,750. The project will ultimately provide a new sidewalk along Chestnut Road between West Memorial Boulevard and US 92. The board approved Amendment 3 with Jacobs Engineering for the Lake Wilson Road widening project at an expected cost of about $133,000. While about 90% of the project has been completed, additional changes are needed. A consultant authorization agreement with Wright Pierce, Inc. to provide professional engineering services for the upgrade lift station number 253 project, which is expected to cost about $191,000. The First Amendment to a contract with We Care of Central Florida, Inc. for transportation services to healthcare. The total amount of the cost is not to exceed $346,349. A second agreement to the contract with Elder Point Ministries of Greater Lakeland, Inc. for transportation to healthcare-related facilities was also approved at the cost of $150,000. The First Amendment to the contract with Tri-County Human Services, Inc. for the Men's JASA, or Jail Alternatives to Substance Abuse program, at a cost of about $174,000 annually was approved by the board Tuesday. A nearly $9.2 million piggyback agreement with Application Software Technology for an upgrade to the county's Oracle software, which it uses to run its financial, budget, procurement, and human resources application, was approved by the board. A transportation infrastructure improvement agreement between KRPC East Johnson LLC and the county was approved Tuesday. This project will include transportation improvements to Barry Dacre Road and other off-site improvements at the intersection of Baker Avenue and US 1792. A right-of-way agreement for 3 parcels was approved by the board Tuesday in conjunction with the Sunset Trail Stormwater Quality Improvement Project. This agreement is expected to cost about $253,000. The annual financial audit report for the Highland Meadows Community Development District also was approved by the board. Angela Buchanan was reappointed to serve as a member of the Housing Finance Authority for a 4-year term that ends in February 2024. Franklin Ed Shoemaker was appointed as a member of the Housing Finance Authority for the remainder of the term that ends in November 2020. Jonathan Fleming was reappointed as an alternate member of the Planning Commission for a 3-year term that ends in July 2023. During the afternoon session, the board held several public hearings on a variety of items. Those items up for consideration included a modification to an already approved development agreement between MM Properties of Polk, Rogers Brothers, Grand Reserve Nashville, and Antioch LLC and Polk County was approved Tuesday. The first public hearing was held, but no action was taken on a proposed amendment to the Land Development Code to change certain regulations for model homes. In a 4-to-1 vote, the board approved the vertical expansion of the North Central landfill to 380 feet above adjacent grade. Well, that wraps up this edition of the Board Review. To keep current with programs and progress in the county, visit us online at polk-county.net or follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We encourage you to join us at the next scheduled board meeting at 9 a.m. Tuesday, September 1st, 2020. I'm Tricia Pichette. Thanks for watching.